Hello, I'm Dr. Xavier Cole. I'm president of Loyola University New Orleans. 20 years ago, I was an assistant dean of students at Loyola University in Baltimore, Maryland. But I was also a musician, a pretty active musician playing in a big band. And I was sitting in the kind of bar lobby of a hotel where we were playing Mood Swings Big Band. And I looked up on the TV and saw CNN had popped up for breaking news. And it showed a hurricane that was encroaching upon the Gulf. In fact, it was in the Gulf. What was strange about this particular hurricane, and just to help you understand some context about me, I grew up in Biloxi, Mississippi. I know hurricanes. Betsy, Camille, Frederick, Elena, and then I went off to college. So you mark time by big hurricanes, and so I saw what they were calling Hurricane Katrina. In my lifetime, which I was born in 70, I had not seen anything as big as what that was. It took up the entire Gulf. I panicked. It scared me to death. I knew how fast hurricanes move. I wasn't home. All of my family was on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. I wondered where they were, and I wondered if they were evacuating. So I immediately started to try to call my family, and I couldn't reach anybody. I didn't know any other news. I didn't know that the phone lines were clogged up and down. I didn't know that people weren't getting through, that there was already evacuation that was happening. So I further panicked because I couldn't find my family. And then someone had said that you could text someone, and texting was relatively new at that time. You could text someone and you could get through. And I was like, my dad's not gonna be looking at a phone for a text. He doesn't know technology, but it got through to my dad. And he was what I was most concerned about. He was living on family land that was very vulnerable. It wasn't a brick house. It wasn't even a straw house. And so, was he evacuating? So I reached most of my family that was still on the coast, and they were all headed to other parts. They were headed to Atlanta. They were headed to Montgomery and Birmingham. And my dad was gonna ride it out in Hattiesburg. Lord have mercy. So he went to some community center with other people, and I worried about him for the entire time. That storm came through, I came through Gulfport. It devastated what was my home growing up, which Biloxi, Gulfport area, Ocean Springs, completely wiped it off the map. It was a very different experience than what happened in New Orleans, which got the outer bands and the rain and then the levee breaking. And so it was a very different thing. It was hard to get my head around it. And then I started to watch the coverage of New Orleans. Heart sank. They're my people. Anyone that knows that the Gulf Coast is connected from Mobile to New Orleans, it's one thing right now. The new Amtrak line connects these places because we're all one culture, one family. And watching people in the Superdome, watching folks who could not afford to evacuate struggle, just the deep humanity of it completely broke my heart. But I felt, what can I do? I brought a group of 20 students down from Loyola, Maryland to meet the people, understand what our responsibility was as Christians and Catholics to rebuild. I learned electrical work. I learned mechanical and running a backhoe. There are many things, don't tell my wife about this, but there are many things I could do to fix our house that I act like I don't know how to do. It keeps you from doing too much real construction work around the house. But we also taught the young people how to do it, and they were amazing. And I remember the thing I was most proud of is not just that the students were serving and being servant leaders, is that they were meeting the people, my community. I had been away from home at that point for around 20 years. I hadn't really been home. And I was so proud of how they embraced what was Southern about them, what was Mississippian about them, what was Catholic about them, and just what was good about the deep hospitality that exists in the South. And I'd wanted them to understand me a little bit better, and I didn't know that this was the way for them to understand better who I was, but also what this region is and why it's worth rebuilding and saving. They're beautiful people, a beautiful culture that needed to be brought back. When I brought students back to do service on the Gulf Coast, I don't think I've ever been more proud of my home. Everything about it. their resilience and hospitality in the face of their own struggle, very personal loss, people that lost family members, that lost property. Their hospitality was still there 100%. This was very much work that was expected of faithful people to our faith. This is what we were supposed to do. There was just no question that we were going to come down in force to help these communities rebuild because of the people here. We were doing the service work that was expected of us as Christians, to come down to be part of a solution and to do it for no praise, no pay, no recognition. And what we got out of it is the reflection about how to serve, why we serve. Every night we would sit with these young people and make sure that they weren't doing the work for their own gratification, that they understood that this was about their formation into a servant leader for the future, to understand that whether it was this or some other place where those would want and needed to be served, then we were the people who had the privilege and the means to help. Therefore, we helped. That's who we are as Catholic. That is who we are as Jesuit. And it was basically faith in action. And to help the students understand that our mission lives, that it's not just words on the page or things that you see inscribed in stone as you walk through campus, that this is a living, breathing charism that has a real impact on the world. And it's God-centered and it's love-centered. And that poured through in all the volunteers that we met here that weren't Catholic, that were Muslim, that were Mormon. There were so many people that came out of Utah. The Lutherans were in full force down here. But the common theme, or people of faith, came together to make something right and to serve others. One of the most important things that happened, at least in the higher ed realm, during that Katrina period, is when all the presidents of the Jesuit schools got together and decided and agreed to take in all of the students from the Gulf South who were displaced by Katrina. These students were just starting their year. Some were juniors and seniors, and all of a sudden they didn't have a place to go to school. And so Loyola, Maryland, was assigned between probably like 35 and 50 Loyola New Orleans students. Only Loyola New Orleans students. So what a blessing. All of a sudden, this ragtag band of Southerners showed up on the East Coast in Baltimore on our campus and completely took it by storm. We didn't know what was happening with us. All of a sudden, we had this infusion of New Orleans and Louisiana and the Gulf South into a very Baltimore, Maryland place and a very upper East Coast place, a Mid-Atlantic place. The students from Loyola New Orleans live freer. They're more open. They talk loud. They hugged a lot. They talked about food a lot. They talked about their families. They're extremely connected, but not in a scared way. It was just this real bonding. And then they did the thing that's very Southern. They opened their circle up and invited us in and helped us try to understand the culture that they were 100%, determined to bring to spice up Baltimore, Maryland, and Loyola, Maryland. It brought us a lot of joy. These students and their joy and how they engaged the Loyola community as deep Southerners reminded me of who I was, where I came from. I had such deep connection to them. And when they left, I was very sad. One of the things that all the presidents of the Jesuit schools did is they promised that we would send those students back to their home institutions all over the country so we would not basically hurt Loyola New Orleans so they could rebuild with their population. So we sent these beautiful, funny, open students back to New Orleans. But I missed them. So fast forward to 2022, and there was an opportunity for me to come home, to go be the president of Loyola New Orleans. Never in my wildest imagination had I thought that I would come full circle with this place. and these people and these students, or come home. A big part of my decision to come home was not just the people that I met on the ground here and now. That certainly reflected that same joie de vivre that I experienced with those students back in the early 2000s. It reminded me, awakened, that it's time to come home and to be more authentically who I am. I had been a stranger in a strange land for many, many years. Now, I'm just home. So while Katrina was certainly an event of destruction and loss and complete tragedy, it was also a thing that brought together people, communities, and helped us be the best of what we could be. And in this particular Southerner from Biloxi, Mississippi, helped him reimagine who he could be back in the South. For folks into the future, if you want to understand the deep impact of Katrina and how it changed a generation of people who lived here in New Orleans and on the Gulf Coast, it reveals the things that we should be mindful of and actively fighting against every day. It revealed a deep disparity of experience of people who had and those who did not have, and the suffering that came from that. We should be thinking about how do we close the gaps of disparity among communities in our city. The thing that we can do and are committed to doing as our raison d'etre is that we educate. The transformational nature of a Jesuit Catholic education, any education really, but particularly this one, can change generationally. You know, the ability for a person to move themselves out of poverty, to engage their communities with purpose. We have graduates of this place that are doctors and lawyers and social workers and teachers. But we also we educate a first generation student that this education changes their lives. So that's what I want them to know. It pulled back the curtain on something that we all live with every day, which was poverty. But it helped us to be better prepared to say, how do we take care of the least of us? Hurricanes will always be a part of a way of life here on the Gulf Coast. It's something that we accept. There's so many joys that come with living here in New Orleans, whether it's the people or the food or the culture, the music, the beauty. But it also comes with this challenge, how we are prepared for that, how we are prepared to protect not just this physical place, but the people that inhabit it, how we are prepared to protect the things that make us uniquely New Orleans. We could do more with the people part of protecting the people. What are the services that are available to help people without means to basically take care of themselves? That needs to happen. So it's just something to think about. How do we attack poverty and why that's so important for us then, now, and into the future.